I've always heard it being called a global leader, a defender of democracy, a trusted ally. But the more I looked, the more I realized there's another side to the story. From battlefields to boardrooms, we've all been noticing moments where America's closest partners were left facing a harsh truth. One that rarely makes headlines but shifts everything. This video isn't about pointing fingers. It's about seeing the world's most powerful nation from the perspective of those who've stood beside it. Ask the Kurds. For decades, they've been a crucial ally for the US in the Middle East, especially in the fight against ISIS. They put boots on the ground, took heavy losses, but held the line. And yet, when Turkey, a NATO member, decided that the Kurds were a threat, America looked away. Troops were pulled, Turkish forces moved in. The people who had fought America's war were left exposed. Ask Afghanistan. 20 years, trillions of dollars spent, thousands of lives lost. And then one day, without warning, it was over. The withdrawal was chaotic, messy, and a betrayal for many Afghans. The same leaders that Washington had propped up for decades were left to flee. Schools for girls were shut down. Taliban flags replaced American ones. What was all that sacrifice for? Ask Pakistan. Once hailed as a major non-NATO ally, it received billions in aid, drones, and military contracts to help fight terror. But when it became geopolitically inconvenient, sanctions followed. Criticism mounted. The alliance became a liability, not a partnership. Even traditional allies aren't immune. Look at France. In 2021, it found out, not through diplomats, but through the news, that the US and Australia had struck a secret submarine deal, AUKUS. It killed a $66 billion French-Australian defense contract overnight. No consultation, no heads up, just a phone call after the deal. What message does this send? That if you're no longer useful, you're no longer needed. For the US, alliances are like chess pieces, valuable but never sacred. What matters is the board, the moment, the move that benefits today. Take Osama bin Laden. In the 1980s, he was America's guy, a Mujahideen warrior resisting Soviet influence in Afghanistan. He got weapons, training, and a lot of money from the US. 2 decades later, he became the architect of 9/11 and America's most hunted enemy. And Saddam Hussein. In the 1980s, the US supported him in the Iran-Iraq war, sent intelligence, helped arm his regime. But by 2003, he had been labeled a dictator with weapons of mass destruction, and Iraq was invaded, torn apart, and left to rebuild itself from ruins. And even current allies aren't spared when the narrative shifts. Saudi Arabia has long been a strategic partner. Oil, arms, regional balance. But every few years, Washington hits the brakes. Human rights concerns, Jamal Khashoggi, pressure from Congress or the media. The warmth fades, the deals slow down. Then, business resumes. Cold one day, cooperative the next. That's not friendship, that's utility. And when utility runs out, so can the alliance. At the heart of it all lies a brutally simple idea. America first, not as a slogan, but as a doctrine. US foreign policy isn't about friendships. It's about leverage. Economic leverage through trade deals, sanctions, and aid. Military leverage via bases, drone strikes, and alliances. Strategic leverage by shaping global norms, often to its own benefit. But what about democracy? Well, it is promoted, but only when it serves US interests. When it doesn't, Washington has no problem supporting strongmen. In Latin America, the US backed military coups to stop leftist governments from coming to power, regardless of whether they had been democratically elected. In Vietnam, propping up unstable regimes was preferable to the threat of communism. In Libya and Syria, Interventions were justified on moral grounds, but the results left the countries shattered and completely unstable. There's a pattern here. One, where principles are flexible, values are negotiable, but interests are permanent. And that raises the core question: does America build alliances to lead or to win? Now you might think, but surely the US treats its Western allies better. Not quite. In 2013, Edward Snowden's revelations exposed a massive surveillance network. Among the targets, America's own allies. Germany, France, Italy, even Angela Merkel's personal phone was tapped. The justification? National security. The fallout? Deep mistrust. And when it comes to geopolitics, Europe often finds itself sidelined in decisions where the US takes the lead, even when it's not directly impacted. Take Ukraine. European leaders spent years trying to negotiate peace, build ties with both Ukraine and Russia, and avoid escalation. But when war broke out, US strategy took precedence. Washington dictated the terms, funding, arming, and framing the war, while Europe absorbed most of the refugee and energy shock. And let's not forget NATO. For decades, it was the symbol of Western unity, collective defense, shared values. But when Donald Trump entered office, even that was up for negotiation. He called NATO obsolete, questioned whether the US should defend smaller member states, and demanded more military spending like it was a business transaction. All of this made one thing painfully clear. Even long-standing allies aren't exempt from pressure, punishment, or being left out in the cold. The friendship exists, but it's always on the terms of the US. Today, India is being courted. The US calls it a natural ally, a fellow democracy, a strategic partner to counterbalance China's growing influence in the Indo-Pacific. But India hasn't forgotten history. In 1971, during the Bangladesh Liberation War, the US didn't stand with India, even as Pakistan committed atrocities in East Pakistan. Instead, Washington sent the 7th Fleet into the Bay of Bengal, a show of force aimed at India, not in support of its cause. Back then, America chose Pakistan because it was helping open back-channel ties to China. In 1998, when India conducted its nuclear tests, Washington responded with sanctions, trade restrictions, technology bans. For years, India was treated as a rogue nation, not a rising one. And even now, in recent years, during border clashes and heightened tensions with Pakistan, America's support for India has been cautious at best. Despite clear and documented links between Pakistani intelligence services and terror groups operating in Kashmir and beyond, the US refused to take a firm stand. It maintained a balanced position, urged restraint on both sides, diplomatic neutrality, even when the facts weren't neutral. Why? Because Pakistan still offered strategic utility in Afghanistan, because pressing too hard risked destabilizing a nuclear-armed state, because, again, interest came before clarity. And so the pattern repeats. Today, India is seen as useful, a massive market, a tech powerhouse, a bulwark against Beijing. But ask yourself, what happens if India no longer plays the role Washington wants? Now let's be fair. Every country acts in its own interests. Russia does it, China does it, India does it too. But the US has a global reach. It sells friendship wrapped in values, democracy, freedom, rights, and trust. So when it breaks that trust, it stings more. It matters more. Because they say they're your ally, but act like your sponsor. True friends don't ghost you when things get tough. They don't spy on you. They don't abandon you in war zones. They don't fund both sides of a conflict. But America's history is filled with moments where friendship was treated like a rental, not a relationship. Useful today, forgotten tomorrow. So, is the US truly no one's friend? Maybe, but this is what seems to be the truth. The United States has interests, not friendships. It will stand beside you as long as you're standing in the direction it wants. The moment you shift, hesitate, or pursue your own path, you risk being sidelined, sanctioned, or suddenly portrayed as the problem. And the world is beginning to see this. From Europe to Asia, the pattern is hard to ignore. Allies are questioning, recalibrating, and in some cases, resisting. Because maybe it's time we stop confusing strategic alignment with genuine friendship. Time we understand that in geopolitics, loyalty is rarely valued for its own sake. It's not loyalty that gets rewarded, it's leverage.